So this coming week, this coming Shabbos, we'll read the final portion of the second book of the Torah, which is known as the book of Exodus, Shemot in Hebrew, 5 books of the Torah. We will now, this coming week, we'll be finishing the second of them. For the first book and a half or so, the Torah talks about the unpacking, the unfolding of the Jewish people, of the Hebrew people, and the receiving of the Torah. And then the Torah zeroes in for quite a bit on the idea of creating a physical space, holiness in a physical space, which is really very much the idea of Torah. The idea of Torah wants to tell us that it's not just about times of prayer or meditation or helping out in a food bank that are holy, but life in general can be holy. Shopping, playing, family. And therefore, so we have a physical structure, which is not a spiritual structure, it's physical, it's tangible, a tabernacle. And that is now dedicated as a place of holiness. And the dedication is, if it's the tabernacle, which ends up lasting several hundred years, but it's a temporary, they're in the desert. So it's mobile, it's collapsible, it becomes eventually the holy temple in Jerusalem, which lasts for 410 years until it's destroyed by the Babylonians. 70 years later, it's reconstructed and lasts the second one lasts another 420 years and destroyed by the Romans. But this is very much about, there's a focus is on the tabernacle and the building of the tabernacle, which is not just the tabernacle, it's the idea of the future temple and so on. So I want to start just with a Parsha overview, because this overview, what we read yesterday and when we read next week is really, on the face of it, it's just accounting. It's not, there's no storyline, there's no plot, there's nothing Andrew Lloyd Webber can do with, make this into some drama. And that's why it's not necessarily the most instinctively scintillating Torah portion. But we're going to find some things to talk about here. Let me get this out of the way. Okay. The Parsha overview is, an accounting is made of the gold, silver, and copper donated by the people for the making of the Mishkan. Mishkan is the Hebrew word for tabernacle. Bitzalel, who was the primary, he's going to show up in our lesson. Bitzalel was the primary artisan in charge of constructing the temple and its accoutrements. Good morning. Aholiav and their assistants make the 8 priestly garments, meaning the apron, the breastplate, the cloak, the crown, the hat, the tunic, sash, and breeches. We discussed those in prior weeks. According to the specifications communicated to Moses in the Parsha Torah portion of Tetzaveh, which was a couple of weeks ago. The Mishkan, the tabernacle, is completed and all its components are brought to Moses, who erects it, anoints it with holy anointing oil, and initiates Aaron and his 4 sons into the priesthood. Now, initiates is what we are going to be dealing with that today. And before we get into it, but since they mentioned it, on Yom Kippur, the Jews get out of Egypt, Passover, spring. 7 weeks later, they get the Torah. 40 days after 7 weeks later, God speaks to them at Sinai and tells them the 10 Commandments, and says to Moses, "Come up to the mountain. We're going to get I'm going to give you the tablets, and I'm going to teach you the Torah concepts." 40 days later, he comes down, and there's the golden calf. He breaks the tablets. He asks God for another chance. God says, "Come back up. We'll discuss this." He goes up the mountain for another 40 days, and then when God says, "Okay, I'll give you another chance. Go down, and then come back up another 40 days." Well, it was when they was down already. And the third 40 days ended on Yom Kippur. So we're going from Passover all the way to Yom Kippur. It's half a year. The next day, God gives them the commandment of creating the tabernacle. And we're not sure when it finished. There's speculation in the Talmud, maybe they finished at Hanukkah time, right? Started the day after Yom Kippur. It wasn't that big a job. But now they're waiting to launch it. This is a very special place and a very special function of being able to walk into a place, a very carefully, divinely designed place, and they're going to be able to experience godliness. So God tells Moses that opening day of the temple will be on the Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rosh Chodesh means beginning of the month. Today is Rosh Chodesh of the month of Adar. The next month, a month from today, is Nisan, the month of Nisan. That's the month of Passover. Rosh Chodesh Nisan, as they're approaching the first anniversary of leaving Egypt, that's what's going to be opening day in the temple, in the tabernacle. Before opening day, there's a 7-day, we're going to call it initiation time. It's not functional, but they're starting to get moving. The functionaries in the tabernacle, the Kohens, they get going. They're every day. They're in their garb. They're in this tabernacle precinct. They're starting to do some work. It's not yet the official functioning of the temple. So the language we're going to use for that period of time, the pre-opening day time. Because then there's another week of inauguration. That's post-opening day. The pre-opening day time, we're going to call it initiation. So in that initiation time, Moses initiates Aaron and his 4 sons into the priesthood, because the Kohens are a subsection of the Levite tribe, and he says it'll be Aaron, his 4 sons, and any future ones born into it. Then will be Kohens. A cloud appears over the Mishkan, the tabernacle, signifying the divine presence that has come to dwell within it. Okay. So now, let me see if I can get this. Now, there's a question of a discussion which is here on 165. But here I had the slide in here just to tell you where this is going. As every week we take one facet, one portal in the Torah portion to try to expand an idea, and it's always an idea that was put on the table by the Rabbi. The focus of today's discussion is going to be: should kids be told about challenging traditions up front, or should we focus on the fun aspects, addressing the tough stuff later? That's one way of putting the idea. I would say there's a question. I remember as a student hearing a speaker speak about teaching God to children. And I grew up observant. God was always part of my life. But it was an interesting speech, because the speaker said, it's a funny question about teaching God to children. The demographic that least has a problem with God is children. Children, they buy it. They have no problem with this. It's when we get older, we get a little bit more jaded, maybe get a little bit, we get trapped in certain ways of thinking, rightly or wrongly. That becomes, it's adults who have a problem with dealing with God. Kids don't have a problem. And he was saying that sometimes it's adults also, maybe they're projecting their problem on children. Say, teaching God to children is, I'm not sure I accept it myself. How am I going to tell to this child? And in the Rebbe's perspective, it was very important not to hold back on matters of faith for children. And he didn't only mean biological, chronological children. He said, when you're teaching people, when people are being initiated into Judaism, certainly if someone comes, and this is what I do. So someone says, Rabbi, I really know nothing about Judaism at all. I never went to Hebrew school. Talk to me about it. I'm obviously going to try and find what interests them, what they can engage with, what might be somewhere a good entry point for them. At the same time, it's important not to hold back on the fact that we believe in God. So if I invite someone to my house, the first time they're going to come for Shabbos, a Friday night meal, so you want to give there's a nice meal, It's a nice ambiance. We do this once a week. There are a lot of attractive things about a Friday night meal. It also happens to be commanded by God. I don't want to hide that. It's probably not my first hello. It's come to Friday night. Company and food. What's the downside? But the idea that I'm not going to hide the idea that this is a tradition. Shabbos is a tradition that we believe is a divine one. It's not just because we've decided that we have an equation. You want to keep a family together. You want to keep a community together. Take one day off a week. Friday nights a meal, and it's a purely human equation. It's not a purely human equation. And the Rebbe was a very much a proponent that we not hold back on not only not teaching, let's call it God or the transcendent or the miraculous to children, but he meant it more than just kids. So having said that, now let's dial everything back and let's start looking at the Torah portion. Text 1. In the Torah portion, it was said that this is the one second. Text 1, yeah. During the 7 days of initiation, this is from Rashi, his commentary on the book of Leviticus, which we're going to be starting next week. Moses erected the tabernacle, performed the services in it, and dismantled it each day. Okay. So there's two things odd about this. This is what Rashi presents as historical facts. Number one, Moses performed services in it. Moses was not a Kohen. The services in the temple were for the Kohen. This is an outlier where Moses performed services in the tabernacle during these days of initiation. And actually, even a little bit in the inauguration days, as we'll see. But that was not normal. For the 40 years in the desert, after this first anniversary of Passover, Moses didn't do any service in the temple. But he did for the initiation period. That's number one. Number two is every day he would erect it, which is probably not so simple. And at nighttime, he would take it down. And the next morning, he would do it again for 7 days. A lot of exercise. Why did he do that? So let's take a look at text 2. It says actually, you know something? Before I go to text 2, let me just explain. I don't think he has here. No, they don't have here. Why? There was a calculation. There was a calculation that Moses made. First of all, God told him to do the service, but he knew that it had to be done. There was his initiation in the tabernacle, so they needed a tabernacle to be able to be part of. But he knew also that the tabernacle was going to be set up for the future only on the Rosh Chodesh, on the first day of the month. So he was in a tough spot. What do we do this week? I need the tabernacle, but I can't really set it up yet for the duration. We're only supposed to take it down when we're moving. So he calculated that he needed to set it up every day just to initiate the coins. Then he had to take it back down. And then on opening day, then it would be able to stay. Okay. Now, text 2. I want to get into a little bit of what went on there. The way the Torah describes it is that he placed the altar of the burnt offering in front of the entrance of the tabernacle at the meeting. He offered up the burnt offering and the meal offering as God had commanded him. This is Moses in these days of initiation. That's the way the Torah describes it. Then it says, 4 verses later, it says he set up the courtyard around the tabernacle and the altar and put up the screen at the entrance to the courtyard. And with this, Moses completed the work. So look at how the Torah describes it. There's a tabernacle. Tabernacle has a center, a holy of holies. There's tapestry, there's gold, there's silver, there's lots of stuff. There's a courtyard. There's an enclosed courtyard of curtain of of skins. Then there inside there's curtains so that not everybody could see what was going on. It was more of an intimate relationship of bringing out the altar. There were screens there. So you would think he'd set everything up and then do the service. The Torah doesn't describe it in that sequence. Torah says he put the altar there, he brought the offerings, and then he set up the screens. So in other words, he did it before it was fully set up. He brought the offerings before it was fully set up. And we can see in text 3, that was the system. In Numbers, we're told how it would work. We had families of Levites who were in charge of collapsing and building, and for the long haul in the desert, and later on in Israel, of taking care of the physical structure. So there were two families, the Gershon family and the Merari families. They were in charge of erecting the tabernacle. The Kahat family carried the sacred furnishings, the accoutrements in the temple, the menorah, or the table for the challahs. So what would they do? They would first erect the tabernacle while the Kahat family traveled behind them. This makes perfect sense. People would go, if you're traveling, first you set up the tent, and then you bring in the food, you bring in the stuff, you bring in the sleeping bags. So they would erect the tabernacle in advance, so that by the time the Kahat family arrived, they would find it complete. They would bring in the ark, the table, the candelabra, and the altar, so all that stuff, which makes perfect sense. But Moses didn't do it in that thing. He set up part of it, and then out there, before the walls are properly finished, he would bring the offering in initiation time. Why was that? The question becomes deeper if you look at text 4, that we've been there, done that. We find that Bezalel, remember I mentioned him earlier, Bezalel was the chief artisan. And God told him, take Bezalel, trust him, he's going to take care of him. Bezalel, the word Bezalel means, if you break it up, and the Talmud points this out, is Betzel means in the shadow of God, in God's shadow. Bezalel was, and one of the reasons we say it was called by this name is from here. Bezalel objected to Moses because Moses wanted to bring in, when building it, you want to bring in the furnishings and then build the house, the tabernacle around it. That doesn't make sense. You build the house and then you bring in the furnishings. So, but when he said that, and you see it scripturally, in the sequence, what he tells Bezalel is bring in the stuff and then build the house. So Bezalel objected. The common custom is to build a house first and then fill it with furnishings. Moses replied, you know something? You must have been in the shadow of God, because that's exactly what God said to me. And this is how he built it, the tabernacle first and then the furnishings. But the question is, why did Moses want to do it first without the house? And once he's told that, he goes and does it again anyway. Okay. Now, to deepen the question, there's really a question as to whether this was even legal. The Nachmanides was a little bit after Rashi. He doesn't agree with Rashi's understanding of the sequence. He says that's impossible. Moses was not allowed to bring offerings without the fully set up tabernacle. Moses offered the burnt and meal offerings at a later point. The Torah is not giving us the sequence when it mentions one first and the other one later. It is forbidden to offer up an offering in an open yard that is not screened in. Doing so would have rendered the offering unfit, for it would have been slaughtered outside of the tabernacle. We therefore conclude that he brought those offerings at a later point. Nachmanides doesn't agree with Rashi. He says, how could you say that? Because he mentions first bringing the offerings and then bringing in the screening. Okay, so you have a question, figure with the Torah sequence, we'll have to figure that out. But how can you say that Moses offered offerings without it being fully set up? It's forbidden. Rashi obviously disagrees with that. But it's the idea, even from a Rashi perspective, why would Moses have stretched the law for this? So now, we have, just to concretize, we have two questions. First of all, it doesn't really make sense what Moses did. Second of all, it's against the law. So let's talk about the law element. Text 6. God spoke to Moses saying, erect the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, on the first day of the month. So there were, again, it said there were 7 days of initiation and then 7 days of inauguration. The first day of the month was that was the beginning of 7 days of opening day in the temple. But actually, it wasn't only, it was the first day of inauguration, but it was also the 8th day of initiation. How do we know that? Because the Torah says it very clearly. 7a, it came to pass on the 8th day of initiation that Moses summoned Aaron, his sons, and Jewish elders. I'm sorry, so that's 7a. It came to pass on the 8th day that Moses summoned Aaron, his sons, and Jewish elders. And on 7b, says it came to pass on the 8th day of initiation, Rashi says. So we usually see 7 days of initiation or 7 days of inauguration. The first day is a swing day. It's the first day of inauguration, but it's the 8th day of initiation. This was the first day of the month, Nisan, the day that the tabernacle was erected. Now, why does this make a difference? Moses understood, as I was saying before, Moses understood that he has this 7 days of trying to initiate the Kohanes, but what's he going to do with the tabernacle? So in text 8, you see, this is what you must do to sanctify me, to the priest to serve me. Sorry, to sanctify the priest to serve me. Bring Aaron and his sons to the entrance of the tent of meeting and bathe them in water. This was the times of initiation. The sacred vestments that belong to Aaron should belong to his children after him, to be exalted by them and to invest them with authority. The priest that succeeds them, succeeds him from among his sons, who will enter the tent of meeting to serve in the holy, must wear them for 7 days. So Moses has this calculation. Now the 8th day of initiation, which is the first day of inauguration. Again, there's two separate ones, and now he's still serving, even though he's not a Kohen. He needed to do it in a way that would set a tone for the way forward. Okay, this is the end of that one. I'm sorry. Text 9, you say, Moses also led the service and brought the communal offerings on the 8th day of the initiation phase, the day the tabernacle was erected. So even the first day of inauguration, opening day in the temple, Moses was still acting like a Kohen. Not the second day, but the first day he was. Why is all this going on? Now let's get to our point. Text 10, this is from the Rabbi. The 8th day of initiation was part of the preparatory educational phase for the tabernacle service and the commandment to make for me a sanctuary. It was not problematic for the service to begin immediately upon the altar's erection before the screening of the yard, because the rules for an educational service are different. Okay. What the Rebbe is saying is that Moses saw the initiation phase like the education of a child. And, or you can even say maybe like the launch of a relationship. And even though a relationship has a certain calculus, has certain calculations or certain elements that have to go on, and there's an A and a B and a C. There's something deeper. Let's talk about relationships for a second. Two people get married. We're going to do this in a part of the sukkah, but they take vows. Is it the vows that creates a relationship? No. Vows are functions we have to do. There's certain things what we owe each other because we love each other, because we're committed. But there is something that's beyond the calculation. there is the sense of commitment, and that you can't encapsulate in a calculation, in an equation. For a child, you teach a child how to. This is what we do. We kiss the mezuzah. We eat matzah on Pesach. We can teach all those things. The first thing is you're part of a people. You have a relationship with God. You matter. If I teach my children that they have to care about Israel or care about the Jewish people, I can tell them how many Nobel Prize winners we have. I can tell them how important Israel is in case what happened during World War II. But it's more than that. It's Israel is special to them. Is it because Israel always does everything right? No. It's because there is a special connection. That's not captured in an equation. It's a connection. Moses saw these initiation rites like the education of a people, the education or we call it initiation. What is it? What is he calls himself here? Says calls it it's the education. What is education? Initiating a child into a healthy maturity, bringing them in. Bar mitzvah and basras, maybe that's the inauguration, but first you train them. And what the Rebbe is saying here is that while life, healthy life, functional life has a system to it, there's what sequence, what comes first, what comes second, what comes third. There are some things beyond that. There's some things that are beyond the sequence. They're just because they're not part of the equation. They're the heart of the relationship. And Moses wanted to bring the heart of the relationship to the Jewish people. So now we're going to try and unpack this a little bit by going to something totally off topic to bring us back. We're going to explore a Hasidic story. But before we do that, as preamble to be able to understand the Hasidic story, we want to look at two pieces here that relate to the story of Isaac and Jacob and Esau. Isaac and Rebekah they were the second generation. Abraham and Sarah, then there's Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac and Rebekah had twins, Jacob and Esau, Yaakov and Esau. Yaakov was the good boy, Esau is the not such good boy, the rough. Yitzchak is blind, he's old, and it's time for he's getting close to meet his maker, so to speak, and his wife Rivka goes to tell Yaakov that I want you to go get a blessing from your father. The older twin is technically, as far as birth order, was Esau. Dress up like Esau, and you're going to fool your blind father and get the blessings. Just right. Don't try this at home. This is what happened. This is what Rebecca did. So what is the Torah tells us that after Yaakov left, he came in dressed up because his brother was hairy, he had goat skins, and his blind father feels him, smells him. You say you're Esav, I believe you're Esav, I give you the blessings. He walks out, and then the real Esav comes in. And he says, Dad, bless me. He says, who are you? I said, I'm Esav. I said, you were just here. No, I wasn't. My brother must have come and stole my blessings. And here, the Torah tells us, 11a, Isaac shuddered a great shudder. And he said, who then is the one that hunted game and brought it to me? I thought it was you. You brought me a meal. You're the hunter. And I ate of everything before you arrived. And I blessed him. He too shall be blessed. So it says, Yitzchak shuddered. Now the Hebrew of it is really not so much shudder. It was fear. He had fear. So, but in the context of the flow, he got scared. Oh my gosh, he shuddered. What just happened? Who just fooled me? But in text 11b, so in text 11b, Rashi tells us, what does it mean Isaac shuddered? It's rendered in the Targum, meaning in the Aramaic translation, usvei, which means he was perplexed. That's the context-driven interpretation. The Midrashic explanation is that he saw purgatory open beneath him. Is that he saw hell. That's what Rashi says. Now back, understanding that. So he was afraid because he saw hell. Text 12. Now let's look at a story told by the previous Lav Rebbe. Oh, go. Thank you. I forgot. No, oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss this? Okay. And then there's this. I don't know if I missed it or not. Okay. Text 12. On Wednesday, so actually, before I read this, there was a guy who was in the times of, his name was Shimon from Zamut. In the times of when, as the Jews were going through Russia, especially in the beginning of the 1800s, there became a very strong movement, which eventually spawned the Reform movement. It was known as Haskalah. Haskalah it's known as the Enlightenment. The Jews were coming out of a very painful time, Khmelnytsky pogroms, the whole in Eastern Europe, things were very difficult for Jews. And then you had the French came with egalitarianism, and even considering that a Jew could be considered a human being, and that gave a lot of hope to some people that in science and in free thinking, maybe that we could have a better world where Jews could exist and not be considered vermin. It was very attractive. There became a struggle within although everyone was happy for the Jews to be considered and treated properly, respectfully, the rabbis didn't want Judaism to change, because there was an influence of saying, let's there was an idea in Germany that brought out by Jews, written in Hebrew, that you should be a mensch in the street and a Jew at home. Don't look like a Jew in the street. Look like a mess. The better to present more genteel and go to the parlors and the opera and so on. And then home you can have your gefilte fish and put it. So this was very pervasive, and it was attractive to the youth. So it became a real struggle about how to keep Torah values when Jews who looked kind of like the observant Jews were spreading these ideas, which were leading the youth away from Torah observance. This is a guy named Shimon of Zamut who lived the life, or lived the life. He dressed the part and walked the walk and talked the talk of being an observant Jew, but he was a dedicated Enlightenment guy, and he wanted to spread his ideas to these backward observant Jews. So he gave an account of what happened when he came to meet the founder of Chabad, Rabbi Zalman, because that he was about to be hired in his town as a teacher, a Muhammad. On Wednesday, my turn arrived, text 12. My turn arrived to be received by the Rebbe for a private audience in the chamber that Hasidim call Supernal Gan Eden. I was going to go into the Rebbe's office. When I entered the Rebbe's chamber, I was struck with fear and awe by the appearance of his face. So this is the guy giving his own account. His powerful and penetrating glance and his mighty and deliberate voice inquired, "What can I do for you?" But I immediately recovered and calmed myself. I said, "I'm an elementary school teacher in my hometown. I teach my pupils according to the rules of Hebrew grammar." The Rebbe leaned on his forearms, and then he raised his head, opened his eyes, and asked me how I explained the passage, and Isaac was seized with very great trembling to my students. I explained it according to the first interpretation of Rashi. It means he was perplexed, I replied. And why, asked the Rabbi Zalman, don't you explain it according to the second interpretation of Rashi, quoting the Medrash that he saw purgatory open up beneath him, he asked. In my opinion, this Shimon answered, I replied, one shouldn't fill the pupils' delicate minds with Agada in general. Agada means it's it's a section of the Talmud which is stories, a lot of them metaphoric, but a lot of not supernatural, miraculous, and especially with subjects such as purgatory that might frighten them. We must especially abstain from teaching young children things that they can't even imagine. The pupil will wonder how the large and wide opening of purgatory could fit into Isaac's small room. How could its fires, which have been blazing uninterrupted for 5,555 years, enter the room, and yet Esau and his father survived and were not burned to a crisp? So then the Rabbi Zalman replied, and how does the Medrash know that he saw purgatory open up beneath him? He asked further. I remained silent, making no reply. Obviously, I had no answer. Indeed, this would not be the first gross exaggeration in his mind found in the Medrash and Talmud. When he saw that I remained silent, the Rebbe said, when Esau entered Isaac's room, Isaac asked him, who are you? To this, Esau replied, I am Esau, your firstborn son. But this was a lie, because the Torah tells us that he had already sold the birthright to Jacob in a legal sale with all the required formalities. So in fact, when he said, I'm your firstborn son, that had been the case when they were born, but at this point, he didn't have the firstborn rights. Isaac knew this. And Isaac was very frightened by the lie that attempted to annul a reality that was valid by Torah law. That's what caused him to tremble. For telling such a lie resulted in purgatory opening beneath him. So when the Rebbe finished speaking, he leaned on his forearms as he had done before. Then he raised his head and opened his eyes. It is customary that whenever he receives people, even during the daytime, there are two lit candles, Chumash and the Zohar on the table. He now lifted one of the two candles, scrutinized me, and said, you come here from Vilna, but you claim to come from Zamut. You convert little children to the idolatry of Haskalah, but you claim to be a Malamed, a Torah teacher. Because of these lies, purgatory opens beneath you. How many souls have you already destroyed? You continue to betray. Yes, it's true. You are a heretic, and anyone who goes down that road will never return. I quickly fled his chamber. Okay, so this is tough. But the point of it is that it makes sense. It makes sense not to take little kids and tell them things that they can't conceptualize. A splitting of the sea. At the same time, if you want to teach children that there are things we don't understand, we believe in a God we don't understand, we believe in a God who can create miracles, that's exactly what you want to talk. Because it is part of our faith. So even though there is a proper way to educate, there's a sequence. And this is from Rabbi Chila Yaakov Weinberg. He was a rabbi, a very big Torah scholar, a rabbi in Berlin. He actually, the Rebbe got rabbinic ordination from him when he was in Berlin. BC, he writes, the first principle of practical pedagogy is to establish a regular order. Every form of pedagogy seeks to impart knowledge the pupils do not possess and to develop certain character traits. How is this achieved? Primarily through repetition and habituation, to daily and hourly measured repetition by progressing in a balanced, deliberate, and progressive way in all times and places, and by using consistency and precision. So I'm not sure why they put this in here, but the idea is, it makes sense. That's definitely a Torah idea. But I guess even in the repetition, you're trying to give them something that's beyond a calculation. You're trying to ingrain something in them. That's what you want. You want to teach children habits. If you tell them, say please and thank you, it may take a while until they understand the need to say please and thank you. But you want to get them into good habits, to hold the door open, for someone. And one of the habits is the idea of belief in something beyond us. So in 14a, he says, although it is important that every Jewish child be taught according to their path. What? Did I do it?
You got 3 different sets of numbers running.
I don't think so. No. 14a, although it is important that every Jewish child be taught according to their path, we mustn't be content with the limited pedagogy that is common around the world, though this too is consistent with the Torah's approach. Rather, our education must also include sacred, transcendental content, even if it is beyond the child's current understanding. We must even teach the concept of self-sacrifice on occasion. So you think, if I have a little kid, am I going to teach them that Abraham took Isaac to offer up as an offering? It's a scary story. I could see someone saying, wait till after Bar Mitzvah for that. It's going to be, traumatizing them. They won't want to go camping with dad. Or you say that you have to teach. This is what the Torah is teaching us: is that Isaac went willingly. He was 37 years old. He could have said no, but even though we believe in maintaining life, and the fact is that he didn't die, but you want to teach things that yes, even a little kid should understand. And if they understand that they don't understand it yet, but they know their values that they don't understand. Text 14b. This pedagogical approach that produces the desired result that even when they grow old, they do not turn from your teaching. It inspires pupils to a firm, durable, permanent commitment to Judaism. Even when they step out of the home and the environment of holiness, they remain strong and firm in their Judaism. In a relationship, and I started there before, if a person says, I'm getting married to her or him because they do A, B, C, and D for me, then I'm glad they do A, B, C, and D for them, but that should not be the sum total of the relationship. Because if you're committed to someone, so maybe D doesn't happen so much as a person gets older, or B doesn't happen so much as a person gets older, or something, things change. But are you committed to the person? That's not, you can't really quantify that in an equation. It's good to have equations. And if one of my kids says, I want to get married, say, what about her? What about him that makes you interested? I want to hear that. That's important to think through. We should have a plan. But when it comes to important commitments, it's not only about the quantifiable details. And in 14b, what the Rebbe's point is, the Torah says, teach a child while they're young, according to their ways, so that they will stick with it when they're older. If I teach a child that in a quantifiable way, say, something, we do Friday night because it's nice to get together with family every week, and we do this because we part of the film because we want to be able to meditate every day, and light Shabbos candles because we want to bring beauty into the home. As time goes on, you might say, something? I can bring beauty into my house without Shabbos candles. I can meditate without film. And something, I don't need a weekly thing. If it's such a quantifiable equation, we say, no, we believe in God. And God gave us a Torah, and that's important. Now, that's what we want to do. We want to be Jews, or we want to live as Jews, and we want to do Jewish things. Now, if we want to talk about benefits, sure, we can talk about benefits. But even if I don't see the benefits, the relationship still asks me to do these steps. We'll go now to 14c. The Rebbe brings us home to the Moses thing. We offer sacrifices in the temple, sometimes the bodily pleasures and the animal soul, even if we're not in a home that is illuminated permanently and obviously with God's holiness, such as houses of prayer or study. We're going full circle back. Why did Moses bring the offerings before the structure was up? Moses taught the Jewish people that bringing offerings is giving of ourselves to God. Bringing offerings means finding closeness with God. The word carbon, the word for offering means coming close. Now, there's a system. These people at this time and these objects, there's a whole system to it. But it's not only about the system. It's about the relationship. So he specifically wanted to bring an offering before it was all done. Because it's not that it's all an equation. We do this, we do this, we do this, and then we bring an offering, we're close to God. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes the closeness doesn't come that way. It's not always contained within the wall. We also eat sacrificial meat, the Rabbi writes. This represents the idea that our firm commitment to Judaism becomes our food and nourishment. We remain committed even if we are in an environment that is spiritually arid and is not surrounded by the walls and boundaries of holiness. Said Moses was saying, you cannot limit a close relationship with God to specific places and specific actions. Sure, there is a holy tabernacle, and it's a gift to us, and we'll be able to do this. It's going to be great, and we're really happy it's starting. But just to let you know at the get-go, it's not dependent on this. And there, I don't know if he was thinking it then, there will come a time we don't have a temple. Temple can have a relationship with God. Of course you can have a relationship with God. It's not bound by it. I don't have a synagogue in my town. I can't have a relationship with God. Of course you have a relationship with God. You're the temple. Do I believe in synagogues? Yes. Do we believe in the tabernacle? Yes. Do we believe in all the steps and the equation? Yes. But it's not limited that way. So in 15, we'll go through this. This is an article written by the guy who puts together this.
Actually, let's stop there for a moment.
Sure.
Okay, the fact of stating illuminated permanently. The one thing that we did not see when they were setting up the tabernacle was the eternal light being mentioned.
It was well, there wasn't an eternal light. The eternal light was the fire on the altar. There was no eternal light. It was a fire on the altar. Today we have something representing it. Okay. So this is by the author of this curriculum. His name is Aaron Loshek. So he wrote an article. Many parents take a common practice approach with their children. I don't want to overwhelm them with anything over the top or too intense. So I'll leave it to them to discover religion slowly without pressure. And so they are shielded from anything that their parents deem too extreme or fanatic. Teach them some Hebrew, a little about Israel, rituals around the holidays. That's nice. Who doesn't like apples and honey and afikoman treats? That's great. But asking them to pray at age 10, not watch TV for a whole Shabbat every week, really not eat non-kosher candy? Relax. Let's take it easy. They're just kids. Let's not scare them off with too much too soon. You're forgiven for thinking so. But Moses teaches us that sometimes you must buck the common practice and leapfrog a couple steps. Pile it on early without worry. On the contrary, doing so will ensure that even when the walls of whatever holiness they have come down, they'll still be strong with the values and passion you imbued within them before the walls went up. And as it is with children, so is it with us. So it is with us. Who wants to go crazy and bite off more than they can chew? You think to yourself, I've got to take this slowly and methodically. This is a process. I shouldn't take on too much too soon. And that's totally true. You're right and you're wrong. You're right on an average day, but not every day is average. Sometimes you must get on the express train. Don't wait until you've built an entire building for Jewish infrastructure before signing on for that all-night Shua learn-a-thon or getting your own bread tefillah or committing to monthly mikveh visits. The person comes in here, recently, maybe I brought this up last week. So someone comes in here to deliver FedEx and they have a Jewish name on the thing. I'll ask them to put on tefillah. Say, I don't know what this is. So what should I say? So sit down. We're going to teach you Aleph Beis, and then you're a Jew. God wants you to put on tefillin. We'll put on tefillin. Come back. We'll study Aleph Beis. We'll study the alphabet. But you don't. Not everything has to be only in a sequence. Take the cue from Moses, who offered a sacrifice even before the walls went up. You too can take the plunge right now. You're not ready? That's okay. The Jews in the desert weren't either. Moses did what he did anyway, and it worked. Be like Moses, it'll work for you too. So here are key points. Number one, Moses performed the service on inauguration day of the Mishkan the tabernacle in what seemed to be the wrong order. He brought offerings before I was totally up. 2, he learned from this from other elements of the service at that point, namely that in the educational inauguration stage, things are different. The reason, number 3, the reason why he specifically changed the order is that in the educational stage, we sometimes must buck conventional, progressive, pedagogical methods. Next, this idea was developed and expanded through the story of Rabbi Zalman and this Shimon of Zamut. And finally, don't be afraid to sometimes bite off more than you can chew in areas of religious commitment. So this is, maybe a little bit out there for most of us. We're not I don't think any of us are educating little children now. But I think it's about more than that. It's about recognizing that even in our own progression through Judaism, it's a relationship. And it's not just about the details, the elements, the concrete elements of an equation. It's about what the relationship demands. And sometimes you do things, but you jump the gun a little bit. So, if there are any questions,
I have a question about
what's the question?
purgatory.
Purgatory.
I always thought, based on what I heard from
That's the most interesting part of the whole thing. Purgatory. Yeah.
as
Yeah.
as sinners need to be prepared.
Yeah.
He said that when a person dies, the soul goes in this cleansing place,
Cleansing place. That's purgatory.
for about 11 months or so.
We say Kaddish for 11 months, with the maximum 12 months. Purging means cleansing.
I understand, but the picture that was described in this rabbi discussion with Melamed was purgatory, reminded me of what impressions of the Christian hell is.
It was a little harsher, yeah.
But what's the reality?
Oh, what you mean the way he described it with fires? That guy described it.
Yeah.
He was an enlightened guy. I don't know where he got his
So there is no fire, brimstone fire.
language. The language of fire is used. Rabbis for millennia have described that it's not physical fire. We don't believe in physical fire. We don't believe in anything physical. Your soul, and it's not a physical fire. The easiest way, which is found, at least for me, that to be able to explain it is, it means like a burning shame when we come to face with our lives, and that helps us. No, we don't believe in a pitchfork and
The devil is the tail. So no Christian, no Muslim type of.
No, we got our own. Yes, Jerry.
Okay,
Excuse me a second.
So this is a difficult issue, keeps me up at night. You know that already. I've asked you this a lot, but so burning shame, and then like one day when you hit the 12 months, it's like, oh, okay, you did it. You burned enough already. And like, how do you come out of that?
I think the idea is, if for me, let's say I embarrassed someone this morning, right? Gennady, he's always yanking my chain, and I said something to him and I embarrassed him. So now I have to think. I say, that's terrible, right? I just stained myself. So first step is I have to go tell Gennady I'm really, really sorry, genuinely, and I have to feel it. And then between me and myself, I have to think about how do I make sure to tinker with that, because to feel the depth of that I can of how really antisocial it was and how I may have made him feel. And then once I've asked him, I've apologized to him, asked him for forgiveness, and he's given it, and he will. And I've thought this through and apologized to God for it, and I've resolved properly for the future. What else is there?
No, but in the purgatory,
Purgatory is also about recognition. That's all it is, and regretting it. They can't go ask if I recognize. If I didn't realize I offended Gennady, and I've passed on already. And now I know that some Sunday in 2024, I thoughtlessly and really unconsciously, I offended him. He went home hurt, and I didn't know about it, and so I couldn't apologize for it. So now my soul feels terrible, and I feel regret. What else am I supposed to do? And that cleanses it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. I've been thinking about the vision of the gates of purgatory.
Yes.
Okay, that seems to me.
I think we should make that the focus next time. Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of sinners on the table.
It's
Seems-
interesting stuff. Hell,
Yeah, it seems to me to be a developmental concept. You know, basically Isaac saw a division between his sons,
Okay.
and by seeing the gates of hell or purgatory or whichever you want to call it, you know, he saw what was coming among Jacob's sons.
Okay.
And also the rest of the world.
Okay. It's certainly an interpretation that could work for anybody. It works for me. That's fine. It's the idea of behaviors that need to be addressed, and they're addressed through purging. All right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
No,